Hello and welcome to Epiphytic Cacti. Today let's take a look at Rhipsalis burchellii. I'm going to say that Rhipsalis burchellii was one of the hardest plants to collect because I kept on collecting Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana. Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana and Rhipsalis burchellii are very, very similar. The plant in the background here is Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana. I have this plant here more as like an idea of Rhipsalis burchellii will also grow into something magnificent and gorgeous like this. And maybe even a little bit more gorgeous if you like the color red. Or you like red plants. Some people really, really dislike red plants. And some people are like, oh, that's amazing. But here we just have little baby plants that I have going on. And over on the right, there are more little baby plants of Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana, both of which I purchased under the name Rhipsalis burchellii. One of them I imported from another country, and another one I probably just found off of eBay or something like that. Most of the time, what we'll end up saying is that to be able to tell the difference between the two, you need to wait until they produce fruit. And I would normally say, yeah, wait until they produce fruit. However, in this case, I'm actually going to provide some tips of how you would be more likely to be able to collect Rhipsalis burchellii and believe that it's Rhipsalis burchellii instead of my experience, which was continuously collecting Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana. I want to start off with the endangered status. So according to the IUCN redlist.org site, Rhipsalis burchellii has an endangered status of least concern, and the population is stable. The species occurs at the upper elevation limit of 900 meters. It grows in southeastern and southern Brazil in the states of Sao Paulo, Espírito Santo, Paraná, and Santa Catarina. I want to read the descriptions, and we can start off with the oldest description. So the oldest description coming out of the Cactaceae by Britton and Rose. It says, much branched, very weak with long, slender, hanging branches. The branches usually dichotomous. Ultimate branches usually 4 to 10 centimeters long. Flowers are subterminal. Campanulate 10 to 12 millimeters long. White. The fruit is turbinate and rose-colored. This plant is very common in the forests of Sao Paulo. Dr. Rose collected it in the forest of Jabaquara on August 15th, 1915. So that is actually the type, meaning the first one that was ever described. It's where the description came from. And also in the Botanical Garden of Missou Paulista on August 14th, 1915. This species is named for William John Burchell, who went to Brazil in 1825, where he made large and valuable collections. And then we'll go to the description in Cactus Lexicon by Kurt Backeberg. The body is hanging, branching in whorls or forking. Shoots are thread-like, 4 to 10 centimeters long. Primary ones to 60 centimeters long. Terminal ones to only 6 centimeters long. They are 1 to 2 millimeters thick. If verticulate, then in 3s or 4s, all are plus or minus clavate, light green to reddish, areoles woolly with felt at first, without bristles. The flowers are close to the apex and are numerous. They are 1.5 centimeters long, bell-shaped, whitish. The ovary is without scales. The fruit is pink. And then the description from the New Cactus Lexicon by David Hunt. The body is pendant, less than 2 meters or more. It seems kind of strange to say less than 2 meters or more. Very dark green or dull reddish. Primary branches originating from extension shoots. They're less than 50 by 0.5 centimeters. Crimson red. Branch segments are naked, usually arising in pairs or threes, mostly 2.5 to 7 centimeters. The terminal 2.5 to 3.5 centimeter by 1 to 2 millimeters. Flowers from around the apex of the ultimate and penultimate branch segments. They have 1 to 3 together. They're less than 2 to 2.5 by 2 centimeters. Pale, silvery pink. The pericarpal is 4 by 3.5 millimeters. The stigma is 4 or 5 lobed, less than 5 millimeters. The fruit is ovoid turbinate, circumference of 10 millimeters, brilliant reddish magenta. If we go in the back here, we can see the little orange fruit on Campos-Portoana. Like the description said, Rhipsalis Burchellii will have pink to very bright, like magenta reddish fruit. So that was the one thing that we would so very commonly use to identify the difference between Campos-Portoana and Burchellii. If we take a look at the flower here, you'll see that it has a pinkish sort of tint to it, like they're talking about. It's kind of like a silvery pink. It does have colored stamen, the exact same way that Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana does. I want to point out some things about the difference between these two. So if I take Rhipsalis Burchellii and then I take Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana and I put them like side by side, it would be very difficult to sort of discern the difference between these two if it wasn't for the fact that Rhipsalis Burchellii was grown in a little bit higher light, and so its branches are tinted a little bit pinkish. It is a defining characteristic that I have found, at least the ones that I've collected in cultivation, for all of the Rhipsalis Burchellii. I know that it's in the description. It is still possible to have a Rhipsalis Burchellii that didn't flush red like that. It didn't have red berries. There is a real possibility that somewhere out there a clone exists like that. It's not unheard of in Rhipsalis to have that happen quite often. It's pretty common for there to be a clone that was grown in higher light, that the plant will be very reddish or purplish. And then you can have another one that was not grown in so high of light, you know, that was more shade grown, and it might have like pale berries, white berries, might have a whiter flower instead of a pinker flower. Like the branches might be completely green instead of tinged reddish. So it is entirely possible. And the same light with Campos-Portoana, it's entirely possible. But in my experience in cultivation, it is less likely. And you are much more likely to end up with Rhipsalis Burchellii if you look for plants that have a reddish or a pinkish hue on their branches. Now you want to be really careful because there is one specific thing about this, that you can see that new growth here on Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana, or like Basil growth that comes from the soil line. It can sometimes have a very slight reddish hue, and it will keep that, but only at the base, and it will eventually go green. So there is a tiny little bit, and it's almost always specific to the basal branches. But like brand new growth on this, you can see here, it's green, and this was grown in very high light. But you can see that on Burchellii, the new growth is actually pinkish. It can be very violently red. So if you look for those kinds of characteristics on a plant, you are way more likely to end up with Rhipsalis Burchellii. This is not a very old plant, this plant. So a lot of this growth that's down here, it's kind of newer growth. I can see here the branch that it bloomed from. I can see here that this one is a little bit older. And the older the branches are, the more red they can turn in the sunlight. So that's one of the other things that I noticed. Like here's another plant where this one, you know, we can see on the back side here where it wasn't facing the sun is just this nice dark green. But on the side that was facing the sunlight, it is a violent shade of red. And the older these branches get, the more and more and more red they can get like that. So it can end up being a really, really, really stunning, stunning plant. But here is another one that I picked up just a little while ago, and this one wasn't quite so sun-grown. So I can see like the branches are just a little bit pink, but I also, you know, could see that it had growth like this, which had like a little bit of a tint of pinkish to it. which really helps confirm that it is Rhipsalis burchellii. So if you were trying to find that, that is a very good way of how you can probably be more accurate in your collecting, because it is so horribly mislabeled. So many Rhipsalis Campos-Portoanas that I purchased as Rhipsalis burchellii, and, you know, waiting for bated breath to see the bloom and everything, and then ending up being kind of disappointed. And the thing is that they're never really, like, I've rarely seen Rhipsalis burchellii sold where they show you the berries to help you confirm that. The same thing is true for Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana. But Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana is also a lot more common. So here you see Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana having very green growth. The flowers together, you can see that one is tinted kind of pink, and the other one is always green. Even when the bud very first starts to form on Rhipsalis burchellii, it is pink right out of the gate. The bud here is always on Campos-Portoana is green right out of the gate. And you can see there are no hints of pink on the flowers for Rhipsalis Campos-Portoana. They are white. When the buds very first start, they're green. The branches stay very green. Here's another one. And these all came from different sources, actually. So this one too, all the branches are green. All of the flowers are white. They have a slight cast of like greenish yellowish to them. The stamen are also colored, but these are two plants that are just very, 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 very difficult to tell apart. So I thought I would just kind of give that tip, that trick, and say, you know, hey, if you really wanted to collect Rhipsalis burchellii, your best bet is to look for a plant that looks a little bit pink, or if they have the flower pictures, flowers that look just a little bit pink, or the ovary is a little bit pink. If you look very closely, we can actually see that the ovary is also shaped differently there. So there are differences between these two plants. It's not like they're the same species. They are different species. They just are very, very closely related, which is why they look so very, very similar. I hope that you've enjoyed looking at Rhipsalis burchellii with me. Thank you for watching, and happy cacti growing.